1830, way back then. There was a fellow in the Midwest, or no, up in the Northeast area, that his name was like Omega or something like that. I think it was definitely European, not Irish. So I'd have to look it back up again. Anyway, he started this coach run for like a stagecoach looking thing. But the difference is it was for everybody and it was public and it didn't cost anything.
Oh, wow.
So he would make this run because he had general stores he wanted to bring people to. So he had this free thing and he called it like O'Malley's Omnibus. And that's where it got shortened to. It's just bus. And it's really the public transportation was a bus. Stagecoaches, you had to reserve. You had to buy a ticket. You had to catch a schedule.
That makes sense.
And the stagecoach evolved to motorcoach. So there was a distinction between bus and motorcoach back then. But now motorcoach is definitely the big 45-footers or the 35-footers, multiple people on there. And there's a distinction because you wouldn't call MARTA a motorcoach.
Right.
You'd call that the MARTA bus.
Right.
So we kind of blend the terms together.
That's very cool. I love hearing the history of things.
Yeah.
And
I should get the guy's name up, really.
It's funny because as much as I was in that business, because I was actually explaining to Krystal, my assistant, that back when I used to be a motorcoach person or a bus person, you had to know that, like Eagle, I think, had the drivetrain in the back and had a single tire in the front, and then MCIs had the drivetrain in the front, not the front of the bus, but the front with the single tire behind that. And in Van Hool's, Prevost's, the driver sat basically in the floor in a sense. And she's looking at me like I'm crazy. I said, well, you needed to know that when you're talking, especially to the bus operators.
Yeah.
Not NTA, but bus operators. You had to know, like when they go, it's this and such. You need to know what it was. And
that's right.
And I might have had them backwards. I haven't done motor coach in 30 years, but it was kind of funny because she was looking at me like, "Why do you need to know that?" This is what you did back then.
Vehicle for all.
So the bus is a vehicle for all.
It was his last name was Monsieur Ohms, Omnes, and so he did a run called Ohms Omnibus.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What country?
1827 in France.
Okay.
Started in France.
So the bus started in France.
Yeah, well, the word bus.
Bus started.
That's where it originated, from the word omnibus, which means, to the general public, to the general collective. So there we go.
Oh, that's very cool. I love history.
Yeah, and of course the motor coach is like stagecoach. Oh, yeah, of course. Bit of a distinction there. Anyway. My name's Phelps Hope. I am the president of the International Motorcoach Group. We're a consortium of 54 of primarily family-owned, the high-end, the elite, if you will, motorcoach companies in the USA and Canada. We are a collection of people that support each other on the road. For example, if we're in Atlanta today, specifically DeKalb County.
Yes.
And so if I'm an operator and I'm sending a bus to the Grand Canyon from Atlanta, and somewhere in Kansas City it breaks down, well, then I get on the phone right away to my Kansas City member, and they'll drop everything, go fix my bus so we can keep the clients moving. Or if the bus is not fixable, they'll switch it out and keep everybody going. I didn't know this before I started the job, but apparently in what we call the flyover states, which are the Nebraskas, the Kansas, kind of that Midwest area where there's not as much population, if you break down, you're waiting on tow trucks, and then if you're looking for parts, that it's got to get ordered and then shipped in, and with the current supply chain problems, it can take days and days to get the pieces.
And you can't have
need.
people sitting on the coaches like that.
That's exactly right. So you want to keep them moving, and that's kind of the behind the scenes. One of the reasons that they got together was to be able to support each other. And to be a member, you have to be of the highest caliber in customer service. You have to be an operator excellence. So that when my company, I'm one of the operators, I'm not really, but say I'm one of the operators, I've got a high level of customer service. I've got a high level of training for my maintenance people. I carry the highest standards in safety protocols. My driver training is of the top level. And I want to make sure I'm calling on a company that is similar to mine so that we dovetail together and they're able to service us the same way we would service the client, service the vehicles, and that we're conscious of the safety rules, the maintenance rules, and so forth. So that way it appears like it's one company to the customer. So I joined this organization just over a month ago.
Yes, I
got tapped on the shoulder. The current president is retiring. Her name is Bronwyn Wilson. And for those in the motor coach industry, they'll probably know Bronwyn. She started out in the tour and travel organizations. She's on the West Coast today. And she, too, is Australian. My background is I'm Australian, and I came from Australia to America to study hotel restaurant management, and I've been here ever since. So coincidentally, she's from Melbourne, I'm from Brisbane, so we speak the same language, and it was easy to do a handover is how I joke it.
Yeah.
But learning this aspect of the motor coach industry has been extremely rewarding for me. I'm a little bit of a motorhead anyway. I really enjoy engines. I enjoy vehicles, the history of vehicles, how they came to be, how certain elements within the engine came to be, because they didn't just invent it one day and bolt them together. They started with an evolution from the original steam engines. So it really carries a passion for me to be involved with this group. And I, too, coming out of the Marriott system, very conscious of operational excellence,
yes.
Very conscious of customer service and authentic customer service, not just whitewashing the customer service. So this is very rewarding for me, James, to be involved with this elite group and to be leading them into their next evolution.
So I should know this, but I guess I'm so far out of the motor coach side anymore. Is where are you located?
Well, our mailing address is in Olathe, Kansas. That was our physical street address before COVID. There was a half a dozen staff in, it's basically Kansas City. And COVID hit. Everybody worked from home. COVID extended for a period of time.
Right.
Some positions were eliminated. And the personnel, they moved. One got married and moved to another place. One decided to move back to family. And so before you know it, there was absolutely nobody in Kansas anymore. So we still have our official street address there where our CPA lives. But I'm work remote in Atlanta. We have remote workers in Maine, Los Angeles, New Mexico. So we truly have adopted the full remote way of working.
Well, I didn't think you were going to leave Atlanta because you've been here for how many years?
I moved here in 1989.
Okay.
1989.
You had a company or one or two companies here in Atlanta.
I did, yeah. I moved to Atlanta in part to join Intercontinental Hotels when they were Holiday Inn Worldwide at their corporate headquarters here at Ravinia. And I decided that after being on property with actual guests and ballrooms and all the operations of a hotel, to get into the corporate office was not my flavor. So I decided to bow out, and I started my own corporate event production company.
Yep.
And at the time, I also, a couple of years later, before the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, started a destination management company, which was called Absolutely Atlanta, servicing the conventions that were visiting the city. So I had two companies going, kind of crossing over with their marketplace. So as a destination management company at DMC, I was working with motor coaches all the time, building the convention shuttles, doing group movements, spouse tours, special interest tours, things like that. So it kind of falls back to an area that is very comfortable for me. And as a former DMC, I'm able to get that client perspective back into this collection of owners, the members of IMG, and to be able to give them a perspective that they haven't really had. So I'm excited at the work that we can do and to really help grow the organization, but also to strengthen it and bring in different levels of technology that are happening, really help them get in front of client bases that they're not currently servicing. It's an amazing organization, I've got to tell you. It's really a one-stop shop for all the best motor coach companies in the USA and Canada.
So who's your member here in Georgia?
We have a couple of members here in Georgia, the southeastern stages in downtown Atlanta, Eagle Christian up in Rome, who services Atlanta as well. And one of our Midwest members is getting a footprint in Atlanta, Arrow. and Aero Stages is coming to Atlanta as well, which is great because I feel that the city of Atlanta is a little underserved for convention motor coaches. We do quite often set up the shuttle systems, especially if you're running out to Stone Mountain or downtown DeKalb, or from the downtown Atlanta area, or you're heading up to the northwest portion and heading up to Kennesaw. It can be a little challenging to find the right motor coaches, and especially ones that are higher quality and companies that really take customer service very, very seriously. They really wear it.
Well, I've got a good committee for you to jump on once we're done with this podcast, because we're going to need to arrange some very high-end motor coaches to transport a team if we can win the bid.
Wonderful.
Around. So we'll talk about that after the show.
And that's funny you bring that up, because we got, for example, World Cup's coming to the Americas, 2026. And they called us right away because they need about 30,000 motor coaches to cover the 16 cities that are going to host World Cup, the round robin, the kind of the playoff environment, plus all the finals. And we carry 7,000 buses amongst our membership. So with one phone call, we can cover the cities they are booked into, because we're already servicing them, and they get a commitment with all of our buses right off the bat. So we get calls from Super Bowl and a lot of the big events to really help service them out. So whether it's really big or it's down to, hey, I'm having a wedding and I need just a 30-foot shuttle to take my guests from point A to point B, that's what our members do.
That's
it's everything
very cool.
in between. Yeah.
So have you already gotten calls for the Club Cup in 25?
Yes, we have. That's all wrapped into the same World Cup soccer.
It's kind of interesting because, in Atlanta, we just, about a week or so ago, got announced that we won the Club Cup, or one of the cities for the Club Cup.
Right.
All of our publicity is on Super Bowl.
Right.
And so it just shows, because I've been in a lot of meetings, like our signature series for sports tourism was last Friday, and it turned out to be all about FIFA and Club Cup and soccer or football, as far as Europeans coming in.
Yeah.
So our entire couple hours was about European football.
Oh,
So-
and what's amazing is, Americans in general are still getting used to soccer.
Right.
Football in this country has a different connotation, as it does in my native Australia. Football
True.
to us is either rugby or Aussie rules
That's
football.
true. Yeah.
So, soccer is still the terminology we use in Australia, as that's the primary terminology here in the Americas because of the existence of NFLs and other ball sports. And it's amazing having something like the World Cup raise the attention. Now, the Major League Soccer, obviously, to their fan base, everybody knows that, but it's the non-fan base.
Right.
They're the ones that need to really get excited about it, and this is a great way to kick that off. So kudos to the organizers in the Americas to bring the World Cup over to the USA and Canada and Mexico, because this is going to be an incredible eye-opening exercise for a lot of the population.
Well, what we've been talking in a lot of our committees is it's not just going to be an eye-opening experience for us in America, but it's somewhere where FIFA wants to come and make massive revisions or changes to this country's.
Look at the splash Messi going to Miami did.
Right.
And it, to a lot of sports fans who really didn't pay attention to soccer, it brought it into their forefront. And that's the way to do it. And I'll give you an analogy. I came from Australia, and I needed a job, so I got a job as a bellman at the local Marriott Hotel in Denver, Colorado, which is not there anymore, by the way. It was the Denver Southeast property. And as a bellman, I, getting integrated, and I'm new to the environment, and I was aware of this NFL. Okay, I became aware of it. But I was playing rugby, and I played rugby for Denver University, and that was kind of my interest. So the whole, if you watch a strange sport, you're not attached to it. Curling, for example, when you watch the Olympics,
Canada,
it's kind of fun to watch a little bit, but you don't really follow it. You don't know the players, you
Right.
don't know the rules, and you watch them do this interesting-looking thing for about 20 minutes, and then you're like, okay, I'm moving on. It was the same way for me on the NFL. Well, then Dan Reeves got drafted to be the coach of the Denver Broncos, and I happened to be the bellman that took him to his room. And it was like, oh, okay, here's somebody. I talked to him a little bit, and we talked rugby, and he was from this place called Americus, Georgia, which I had to go look up on a map because I had no idea where he was from. Very southern accent. And then just a few months later, this fellow John Elway was drafted, and I got to take him to the room. And he was from Stanford. And they had a rugby team, so I talked rugby, and I asked him if he ever played rugby, and he said no, they wouldn't let him. Obviously, being on the football team, the American football team, they don't want to, same as they don't want them playing ice hockey. They don't want them jumping out of planes. So
right.
They want to protect their players, if you will. But what it did for me is it attached me to somebody. So now I'm watching the Denver Broncos because I know this fellow. I've met him. I've had a cup of coffee. Well, not literally, but I took him to the room. But it's like sitting down having this kind of a chat. Now you build a relationship. So my interest opened up, and I started getting interested in the NFL. And, here I've been here so long, of course, I've had the wonderful ups and downs with the Falcons.
Yeah.
And that's how sports go. But just how that experience was for me, I believe the general population who are not soccer fans, that don't have an attachment to a team, might now open up, become emotionally attached because they see Messi's in Miami. And more of that is going to happen, and more names will get revealed. You look at the journey of the Atlanta United, the Five Stripes, and it's the same thing. We didn't have a soccer team. We had the Silverbacks for a while.
Right.
And that they were here for a period, as we've had ice hockey teams, and we've had
we actually have a pro ultimate frisbee.
Pro ultimate frisbee. Did you know that there is a Major League Rugby, which is the same as Major League Soccer or Major League Baseball?
Yes, because I think we were trying to get them here to Silverbacks, and then they moved to California.
That's right. So you had the Atlanta Rattlers, and it was Rugby Atlanta, RATL, so they called it Rattlers. A lot of fun. It was semi-pro, and it was a lot of fun to go to. We'd get between 1,200 and 2,000 people at the games, and they went into the playoffs for a few years, and it was just good, fun rugby. But unfortunately, they got bought and moved the team to L.A., and so now we don't have rugby here anymore. But that was played at Silverbacks Park. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of, I don't really want to call them underground, but they're not television push into the
and we don't
community.
know if it's not on TV.
You don't know about it if it's not on ESPN. That's where most people get their opinions from television. Unless you're tied into ultimate frisbee, if this is an interest to you, or axe throwing, or all these other things that are out there. But I'll tell you, they're quite entertaining, all of them. So even back to curling, once you learn the people and you learn the teams and you learn which cities are the primary ones, and just like any other sport, you get involved with it.
Well, not to offend any of our Canadians, but I had a really good best friend of mine, Canadian, so on purpose, I would say, oh, shuffleboard on ice.
Yeah.
And he used to get so mad. So anybody Canadian, it's a joke.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So our members service a lot of sports teams. And so we get involved with things like World Cup, but we also are involved huge in college and high school. Mm. So as the softball season happens and the teams are traveling across country or within their region, they're using motor coaches for those.
Right.
They're not flying these kids everywhere. They put them on a bus and off they go. And, of course, these are nice buses. In our preamble, we talked about the difference between an MCI versus a Prevost versus a Van Hool or the new Tempsa that's come from Turkey and so on. But all of them are very comfortable buses.
Right.
These aren't, Bluebird school buses. These are motor coaches with all the bells and whistles that come with that as someone who's a passenger. So we're very involved in the student youth travel, very involved in the tour and travel, those areas. So it's interesting to see how motor coaches permeate not just in our convention work or in our special interest tours or in shuttle runs from point A to B, but they're also huge in the whole sporting arena at every single level. Anytime you're needing to move a group of people, no matter what they're together for, it could be from a wedding to a wedding reception. It could be, it's a dinner outing at Stone Mountain. It doesn't really matter. That's where motor coaches come in. And it's one of those, until you need them, it's a hidden necessity.
Right.
We've had a huge part of the population that uses MATA, for example. And we're all familiar with the rail, but the buses, the transit buses, there's hundreds and hundreds of them that service the city of Atlanta as supplemental to the light rail that we have. So it's really interesting to learn more and more in a greater detail in this position I am, and it's really got me excited, I got to tell you.
Well, if we have time at the end of the show, I got to ask you about one of your things you brought up in my class, but I'll save time for that.
Okay, that sounds great.
So with all of this, tell us a little bit. I know you were with Kellen.
Yeah, so the last 20 years I've spent my time in association management. And I worked for the largest association management company in the world, Kellen Company, headquartered in Atlanta. And they had seven offices around the world, including Beijing and Brussels for the European market, and 5 offices in the U.S. At our peak, we managed 188 nonprofit and not-for-profit national and international associations.
Yeah, wow.
Everything from the medical to the plumbers to building products to financial to technology, you name it. And it was such an interesting job because I got to stick my nose in 188 different pieces of different industries, so it was quite amazing. My job was to head up the convention, events, trade shows, and be a part of the development team to spruce up the development for membership and so forth. And that took me around the world. We had a large team of meeting convention planners, and we were planning 300 meetings, events, trade shows every year. So it was...
and that's how we met.
And that's how we met.
That's right. Skull.
That's right. Skull International, yeah. And that's the only tourism association that covers all disciplines, everything from rent-a-car to airline to DMCs to meeting planning to hotels to CVBs. The entire hospitality and travel industry is represented at the high levels, the executive level and the senior management level within the industry globally.
Are you still a Skull member?
I certainly am.
See, I wish I would have stayed. It just was one of those where, with different things going on, I just lost the ability to attend.
You know, and it's like any organization you join. If it has a purpose in your life for whatever reason, then yeah. But if it doesn't, then you take a back seat and you move on, your interests move, and you can always come back.
That's true.
You know, and it's not meant to be the same always. That's not how life works.
That's true. That's true. Well, I know meeting you has been delightful, and just our relationship, and with me teaching at Georgia State, you've come and spoke to my class every year. Last year you weren't able to, right at the last minute. That's
right. Yep.
But all the other times you've talked to my class about how to book events and how important events and knowing your market, and you got into the contracting, and so I would assume that even in this side of it with the motor coach, it's that knowledge has probably been very beneficial to running this company.
100%. And I am tapping into all of my past experiences. You know, there's a high level of customer service needed, not just for the members, because the member is the owner of the company. And each one of the owners actually is a shareholder in the corporate consortium. And our purpose is for marketing and sales and then internal operational support. That's why we exist. We're not the American Bus Association. Our members are members of the American Bus Association, but so we don't lobby. We don't get involved with regulations or so forth. Right. We'll support what the ABA does, but that's not the purpose of our organization.
Well, have you heard we're going to be hosting the Georgia Motorcoach Association convention here next year, but it's also 7 states.
That's right. It's the 7 states in the region, and how very exciting. What a great experience it'll be for all of them coming to DeKalb County.
So they'll be at our Marriott in Century Center over in
I know it well. I know it well, right off Claremont.
So now, will you attend that, or is it not really in something
No,
you
that's
do?
exactly what I would attend. In fact, this weekend I head out to California to attend the California Bus Association.
So you do all the state associations?
Not all of them, but if it's either convenient or it's we've got a number of our members who are going to be involved. And quite often I get asked to come to either speak or be a part of a panel or to help be a part of a strategic planning group.
Now you just said strategic planning group. That's another group I have to talk to you about when this show's over.
Okay, that sounds great.
Forming it's probably almost going to be an international
Wonderful
group.
Well, James, as you know, I'm always willing to get involved with what you're doing. You really are a mover and a shaker in this industry.
Well, thank
and
you.
I really enjoy seeing how you break open new ideas and you make them happen. And that's quite rare in the CVB world. Usually the CVBs will allow others to do it and then tag along. You actually are on the forefront, and you actually invent the idea and then frame it out and make it work. And I've been so impressed to see what you've done over these years.
Well, it's because I have friends like you that I can make things like this happen.
There you go.
And then I'm very ADHD, as Monica knows. I get bored very quickly, so I've got to do something new. So our newest endeavor is really, Monica was a student of mine.
Ah, wonderful.
She was my.
And for those of you who don't know, Monica's the lady behind the scenes.
Yeah,
She's
Monica's
the
our
magic
producer
person.
who makes everything work here. So she was a student in venue management and was just sending me information about their digital position, social media position. I go, well, by the way, I have one. So she started the 1st of February. By the end of February, this podcast was an idea.
Wow.
I think we were at lunch at a GAC, Georgia Association Convention Visitor Bureau, and I wanted to do a TV show like I did in Indiana, and she said, well, I can do a podcast. And now we have it. We're in our third transition of this room, and now we've done walking podcasts. We've done 2 off-site, like setup podcasts. We've done this guy was in Houston, and we were talking to him in his car.
Wow.
And the newest thing that we have is we're going to be getting a mobile podcast studio.
Tell me how that works.
So it's Junior and Monica. Junior he is our company that takes all this and edits it.
Ah, okay.
So he's actually building our podcast mobile. So we've got a Mercedes-Benz, the Sprinter, that's going to be here end of November. And it was having to be custom made in a sense, not custom, but we had to have the driver's seat that could turn, so you could sit and run the show. So the control panel didn't have to have another seat to it.
Understood.
So it saved space. And then it was semi-modeled after the only mobile podcast studio they could find, which is an ESPN one. Just completed really not long ago by Mercedes.
So the guests would actually go into the van, sit
Yes.
like we are now in obviously a much smaller and tighter environment.
Right. So we would be able to have 2 guests and then myself. We're going to have a TV set that we as guests can look at. And we're going to have a TV set behind us that the camera will look at. It's like we're doing here, except that would be literally behind us and in front of us to see it. Then we would actually have in the very back outside would be a large TV that anybody can watch either the podcast being done or we could run videos of an event or something.
Wow.
I have a coffee maker. Of course, anybody knows me. He's got to have a coffee maker. And then a cooler and then either brochure racks or giveaways or items to sell. So we're going to be able to take this all around. We'll be able to have the ability to do live shows if we want to from Wi-Fi.
I was just going to ask you, so you can do live broadcasts if you
Yes.
needed to?
Yes, we've not done a live show yet, have we? No live shows.
Well,
but
it's
we
a whole
can.
different animal, that's for sure.
Yeah, because the beauty of this is it does get edited.
Yeah.
So when I screw up, she just makes me sound good. But live, of course. But sometimes I like live because if I screw up, I know I screwed up and I can own it.
That's right.
That's not like
And we all get to see it.
Yeah, we all
You
get
can't
to
hide
see it.
Right.
So we're very excited. We're going to announce that our State of Tourism event probably in March. We'll bring
How exciting.
So we're putting a hot seat on Monica and Junior to make sure it's ready for our State of Tourism.
So then you could travel to other conferences and other events and broadcast live or at least do podcast taping and have guests from the event come in, like the Georgia Governor's Conference,
Right.
or a
Or we
Super
could take
Bowl
it to to any events, or we could take it to a feeder city.
World Cups, FIFA,
Yeah.
and that's right.
That's true. It'll be here for the
Club
Cups.
Yep.
Take it out, and the thing is, it'll be nicely wrapped, so you'll see it, and so it's going to be a showpiece just to drive around in.
Yeah. Well, and for those who don't know, and I had to go do some homework. I mean, the Club Cup is almost a preliminary tournament before World Cup. So one's in 2025, the other's 2026. And it's its own tournament, Club
Right.
Cup, and you get a cup and you get awarded and everything. And it's almost, I don't want to call it a practice run, but it is, it's a tournament to itself
Right.
that is a lead into the more globally televised World Cup. And so it's interesting. It's really an amazing construct for an event. Community events are one of my hot buttons. I really enjoy community events. But
I was immersed in it again for our signature series on sports. One of the speakers was my professor at Clemson, he's been in Brazil, he's been up in Europe, so he understands soccer or football, not the way we think and understand.
Right.
So he really brings that true experience of soccer to the table.
Yeah.
So he was explaining to me, he was the first one to tell me we actually won the bid. I mean, the news was just not really out there.
Right.
So,
like you said, Super Bowl gets the front page, and then page 10 somewhere you get the end all by the way.
It was like when I was a global student in Georgia State, we went to Madrid, and we toured Real Madrid Stadium, and we toured the museum. Now, I hate to say this, but my mindset was, why are we touring a soccer stadium?
Yeah, we don't have soccer.
Yeah, it's like, I don't get this. I mean, it's cool. But then there was Tolu from Nigeria. He was like, oh, my God, it's like this is the Holy Grail or something. I'm like, must be missing it here.
Yeah.
But
again, if you don't follow it, if you're not a fan, it's not important. Yeah.
But now, my professor did a documentary on Real Madrid and a German stadium. And so that was a whole different concept of how important those facilities and those ownership during the time. But then he also was explaining that Real Madrid has the largest fan base in the world. I'm like, wow, this is...
It's like 120... Oh, no, the stadium itself, though. I know the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, can seat 110,000 people.
Wow.
For cricket.
For cricket.
You see, if you don't know anything about cricket, you're like,
Didn't
where do you
America,
find enough people?
Didn't we we're not, as we all know, America is not cricket. But didn't our team actually beat like a major European?
The American cricket team, it's taking a while to get off the ground, but it's getting there. So it had some good wins in the latest round robins, and there's different types of cricket games. You've got your traditional Ashes, the Test cricket. Those are 5-day matches.
Wow.
And that was your typical all whites, the outfits they wear with the white hats and the funny umpires and everything. And that is your 100-year-old version of cricket. Obviously, nobody's got patience to sit and watch a game for 5 straight days, all day long.
No.
In this world. I mean, they did back then. There was nothing else to do.
Right.
So they created T20, which is 20 overs, there's 8 balls to an over. In other words, the bowler gets to bowl or throw the ball 8 times to try it. Then they switch ends of the cricket pitch. So the other bowler then will try it. Same team will try it from the other way. It's like a 2-dimensional baseball game on a 360-degree dimensional pitch. The cricket.
Well, you've already lost me.
Yeah, I've lost
I don't
you.
understand cricket.
Right. I'm not going to try and explain
now you've even
cricket.
made it, I think, more complicated.
But you see, if you don't know the rules and you don't care, it's like any other sport. Why would you bother watching it? But they've modified it. So there's fast pace. There's limited the number of overs, the number of games that they play. One day they've just got to go at it, and so it's almost like you shorten the NFL game and you make it, okay, you've only got an hour and a half to play this game, and we're not going to keep stopping. You just got to keep going and go as fast as you can, get the score up. Kind of like arena football was. It was all about the score. And so it's much more fun as a spectator to watch those things.
But, that was one of the things that was brought up last week is there in soccer, let's use it for that, but European soccer, but our soccer, there's no commercials.
No, and the clock, except injury time, just keeps going.
So
it's like rugby.
That's an interesting thing over here because everything here revolves around the commercial time and that money.
TV timeout.
Yeah, so it's going to be – it's interesting with them coming over here for these big sports and how that's all going to play out.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure at that World Cup level, there's a little more flexibility for having advertisements in there because they're huge dollar makers. Obviously, it helps to pay for it.
Right.
But you're right. Yeah, but it's not as interruptive. Well, see, NFL has a natural for doing ads because it's stop, start, stop, start, stop, start,
Right,
timeout.
right.
You know, there's a lot of structure to the game that TV can seep into. But you watch rugby, for example. If somebody gets hurt, they just keep going.
Right.
They just leave them. They drag them off the field, sprinkle some water on them, get the magic sponge, wipe their face, and they pop up and run back on the field
What's
again.
the New Zealand Blacks?
The All Blacks, yeah. And that's
All
because of
Blacks.
the outfits they wear are all black.
Isn't that New Zealand?
That's New Zealand, that's right. They've been world class for decades. Australia's got the Wallabies. And,
makes sense.
they're in a rebuild. They're coming back. They didn't perform too well in last year's Rugby World Cup, which was in France. France did an amazing job with the Rugby World Cup. I got to tell you, as a spectator and as a real fan of rugby, the way they did the television angles, the way they explained the game for those novices, it was really built for the spectator, and they did a really, really good job of doing it. And apparently, the fan experience at the different stadiums, because the same thing, they spread it to half a dozen different stadiums throughout France. So a little bit like the World Cup we'll be doing in 26. South Africa, the springboks, which is a type of deer from Africa. The Springboks are the current world champions. They won the Rugby World Cup.
Oh, okay.
And it was some amazing rugby, I have to tell you. Really a lot of fun. And I'll guarantee you they use motor coaches to move the teams from point A to point B.
Well, are you sure it's motor coaches or those little you scheduled some high-end motor coaches that turned out to be flatbeds with hay on them for one of your events.
Yeah, that's right.
Never forget that. You
Yeah.
were speaking to my class and you warned everybody to know what is that country's opinion of a bus or
That's right. That was you're talking about my experience in India, where I ordered buses to move all the attendees from the one venue to the other, and this was this was part of SCOL, and didn't check this type of buses they had, and it looked like the opening of Romancing the Stone, where Michael Douglas is on the school bus looking thing going through the Peruvian mountains with the chickens and the goats in the back and the windows down. And here we are trying to move people in black tie with no air conditioning in the very hot months in India from point A to point B. I mean, we did it because we had a lot of fun with it, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, you could kind of say, we wanted to give you
the cultural
true
experience,
cultural experience.
Right? I've used that many, many times.
Yeah, it was interesting when you talked
But
to my
don't
class.
try it with a wedding group.
Yeah, no.
The bride
no.
is not interested in cultural experiences
No.
unless it's planned.
Yeah, true. Well, you always had wonderful stories for my students to learn from, and then your wonderful successes. I mean, this seems like you've had such a exciting career doing everything.
Thank you.
And now
I have. It's you mentioned you're a little ADHD, and I too. I get bored quickly if I'm not working on something or I'm trying to grow something or fix something. The status quo doesn't. I'm not your status quo person,
right, right.
And I started out. My dad was a civil engineer, and we moved on around the country of Australia, and we even lived in Papua New Guinea for 4 years, moving from mine site or civil project. And every 2 years or so, we're up and moving as a family, and we lived in the outback, lived in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and so forth. And with all the big Tonka trucks and the backhoes and these big 105-ton trucks with the 13-foot tall wheels, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do this. This is great.
Yeah.
Until I went to the University of Queensland in Brisbane and found out that it's not that. It's physics and calculus and strength of materials. I went, oh, no, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So much to the chagrin of my dad, I dropped out and I went to work as a bellman at the local hotel. And I fell in love with it from day one. In fact, I distinctly remember saying, you get paid to do this? This is awesome. It's like playing house and just welcoming people to your house and they're your guest and to take care of them. And it was just fit me naturally. Doing that exercise, then I wanted to I wanted to go back to school and learn more on the business side of how to run hotels. And in Australia at the time, there was really only culinary schools, and I really was not interested in cooking. I'm not a foodie at any. Food is fuel. Get it in.
I
and
wish
keep
I
moving.
had your way. I wouldn't be this size.
And so that's what led me to search around what schools would be open, and it brought me to the University of Denver in Colorado, because I figured, you know what? Nobody does business better than the Americans. So an American business school that has a hotel and restaurant management, its own little school, that's going to be the place to be. And that's what I did, and it kicked me off. But the beauty of this hospitality and travel industry is it's so easy to transfer skill set.
Yes.
Hotels to a DMC, to the tour and travel side, to the the destination, the DMOs, destination management organization, marketing organization, any aspect. And that's why Skoll was such a great fit, because you're dealing with the car rental guys and the airline guys,
Mm-hmm.
and we all speak the same language because we all deal with traveling guests.
Right.
And whether they're sitting on a plane or checking in a hotel or getting on your bus, you still have to service them with them in mind for what their needs are, not my needs. And people in the hospitality and travel industry, to succeed, are interested in the well-being of other people. And you have to step out of your own self in order to service them genuinely, to be authentic with it.
It has to be in your blood.
It's right. It's something that is natural to you. And if it's not, because I'll tell you one thing, you will not get rich in the hospitality and travel industry.
No.
But you will live like you're rich. And I think the best way to live and the best way to travel is OPM, other people's money. You bet. So I've traveled the world for my job.
Oh, when I was national sales, gone 3 weeks out of the month, of course I was single.
Yeah.
But it was unbelievable. I mean, the trips I would take, it was hard work, but it was massive fun.
That's right. Yeah.
You know how I got in the business? My dad was a salesman. He traveled West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. So as soon as I was basically born, I would start traveling with my mom and him.
Uh-huh.
So I grew up in these little roadside motels and stuff. And everybody laughs at me. But a major pivot point in my life, ironically enough, was Fantasy Island.
How about that?
Mr. Rourke.
Really?
And his style and welcoming you to the island. And up until Tuscaloosa, Alabama, I was in a suit 6-7 days a week and never took it off basically at work. And then finally I was in Tuscaloosa and they go, does your clients wear suits? I mean, why are you always in a suit? So finally I started dressing more like logo wear or something and calmed down to tourism. But literally you got in it from college-wise, I went into geology because I wanted to be a state park or national park naturalist. Well, geology was not my thing, kind of like you were talking about. And then I also found out that those guys women have to die to get in the position because they never leave.
Right.
So I went to the next best thing, tourism, which is everything.
Right.
Or hospitality and tourism. That's how I got in.
Expanded the horizon. That's
right.
Awesome. Yeah. And we all do. We all come to it from a different place.
Mm-hmm.
How many stories I've heard that they started out in a totally different a totally different industry, or they had different intentions, and then they fell into it, and you either fall in love with it or you spend time in it while you're waiting to go to the next thing. A typical one would be that, you're in school and you're waiting tables. Well, that's part of the hospitality industry.
True.
And it's the same skill set. And so quite often you'll take that and then you become let's reverse mine, a civil engineer. Well, you've developed a customer service centric frame of mind if you've waited tables or if you've served fries at McDonald's.
Right. Well, the other thing I wanted to do as an architect, and I didn't pursue that, but it's funny, I've used that knowledge, that interest to help design this office. I designed the office in Columbus, Mississippi, to help design the office in Tuscaloosa. So it's funny how you do keep using your interest, but you're doing it in the field you really were supposed to be in.
That's
like
right.
With me.
You'll settle into your job, and long gone are the days that your dad worked in the factory and you're going to go work in the factory or the coal mine or whatever it is, because communities weren't really connected very well and industries weren't connected. Well,
Right.
today's media and today's social media and everything, everything is fluid. You can change careers, you can change, you just have to have the interest to be able to do it, and there's tons of mechanisms for it. But and for a transient type person, I've traveled the world. In fact, my parents were on a 2-year working honeymoon from Australia, and I think I've got a stamp on my backside that says "Made in the USA," but I actually joined the world in England, but we left after I was 6 weeks old because they wanted to continue the trip. The real reason is I didn't like the weather, so I said, "No, let's get back to Australia."
So
I
you
was
were born
born
in Australia. I mean, in
I
England?
was born in London. That's right.
But you're not. You're Australian, but
Oh,
born
I'm
in
Australian.
London.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, being born in England, you become a UK citizen, and you cannot give up your UK citizenship. And even if you do renounce it, because you're a citizen of the Queen, now the King, they don't recognize that you've let it go.
So you have triple citizenship?
I have triple because I'm an American citizen as well.
They
changed the rules. So I became a citizen in 2009. To become an American citizen, you could only have one other. You could be dual, but you couldn't have more. And so I had a British passport, Australian passport, and American green card. So I was fine. I didn't want to give up one or the other. My family's all still in Australia, and I might retire back to Australia, who knows. So I want to keep those options open for myself. But then the U.S. changed the rules that basically you just had to name one other one, and they didn't ask you about any others. So it opened it up, the flexibility a little bit, and I'm very proud to have become an American citizen, which is great.
Very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I guess the whole time I known you, I probably just assumed you were an American citizen.
That's right. Yeah.
I knew you were Australian.
My twin flags might
There
give
you
it away
go.
too. I have
Yeah.
the U.S. and the Australian flag on my lapels. So.
Yeah, I did notice that, but again, I didn't think much of it. I mean, other than it, because I knew you're American, I knew you're Australian.
Yep.
But I didn't put two and two that you just became.
Well, I was very involved with the Australian, New Zealand, American Chamber of Commerce in Denver first, and then when I transferred down to Atlanta, for many years I ran what was called the Down Under Ball. It was a volunteer group, and we would have the Australian, New Zealand, American experience within a black tie ball, and we'd theme it. And for about 10 years, I was involved with that, and we did a lot of fundraising with it for good causes. But like anything, things move on and evolve, and people move on, and your volunteer engine sometimes runs out of gas. And it's just time to move on. So that was for a period of time, did a lot of good work. We would generate funding for the United Way.
Oh, nice.
Which was great, and deeply involved at that time. There's a very strong Australian and New Zealand community in the Atlanta area.
Didn't know that.
You can go up to the Square of Marietta up in northwest Atlanta, and you go to the Aussie Bakery. Aussie Bakery and Cafe. You could try goods. Neville Steele is the owner up there, good Aussie. And he bakes Australian meat pies and lamingtons and vanilla slices. And so it's definitely a place to go if you want a touch of Australian flavour.
I need to do that because I don't believe I've ever had anything Australian.
How about that? We'll give it a shot. You'll enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, I got a question. So in my career back, 30-some years ago, I really ended up honing in on Motorcoach.
Okay.
So I was national sales for 33 hotels, 15 states with Cervico back when they were around.
All right.
Towards the end of my time, it was coming out that Motorcoach is dead.
Ah.
So and then I continued doing Motorcoach. Motorcoach is dead. We're doing Motorcoach. Motorcoach is dead. So obviously we know Motorcoach is not dead.
No. Not at all.
Talk a little bit about that.
It really is a growing industry because, like I said, any time either you are trying to get from point A to B and you don't want to drive, it either doesn't make sense or you can't afford to fly, Motorcoach is still the easiest way. Now, you use transit buses or what we call scheduled runs. There's scheduled runs from Atlanta to Chattanooga. Gray Line, Trailways, these names have grown up from... I think the 1920s and forward. that you're used to. You take a Greyhound, you see them on movies, you see it on television, the people getting in off the Greyhound bus, so it is a part of, but it seems to be, it had the reputation of being, oh, you can't afford to fly, oh, sorry, and you got to get on the bus.
Right.
But sometimes getting on the bus makes more sense because it's not something you would fly. Not everybody wants to drive across country, and you let somebody else do the driving in a comfortable environment. And I'll tell you, it's this is now as an Australian looking at America. I have been in many, many places in Australia. The country landmass-wise is just about the same size as the 48 states, contiguous states of America.
Wow.
But what's different with America is you have greenery everywhere. Your middle of the country is an amazing, I would say it's huge in agriculture, but there's a lot to see and do, versus the middle of Australia is all desert, and there's a lot of geology to look at, but it's geography and geology is quite amazing, but it's not a place you're going to live.
Yeah.
And the interstate system in this country, thank you, General Eisenhower.
Right.
The interstate system started in 55, and well, you can get across country from New York to LA and just take freeways the whole way. You get off the freeways a little bit, and the things you will see in this country. And you hear the stories of people retiring and then seeing the country by RV.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You don't have to wait till you retire. Take a tour bus. Go see something.
Yep.
And I always had the philosophy: if you're driving and you see the sign for the world's largest ball of string, get off. Go have a look at it. Don't just drive past.
I see. I'm that type.
And go have a look. And the things I have seen in this country, America is the most amazing country from a geology standpoint, from a geography standpoint, the topography, the communities, the people. There's a huge affinity between Australians and Americans, there's a lot of parallels between the two countries and their growth, very frontier-driven. Australia didn't have a civil war, but they're very similar in how they got to their places, very much a can-do attitude. In fact, very little known is Australia was discovered by England. Now, not really, others had discovered it, but it was put it on the map, Captain James Cook, who discovered Hawaii and Alaska for the Americas.
Doesn't seem familiar.
Same name, yeah. And, what was happening in America in 1770? Oh, this was percolating up to the Revolutionary War.
Right.
So Captain Cook gets back to America around the same time of the Revolutionary War. There were very tough economic times leading up for about 25 years to that point. That's why Britain was storing they ran out of room in their jails. They would put them on the old ships as extra jails, but still, it was terrible times, people stealing bread and so on. They'd arrest them and put them in jail. Well, they would ship them off to the Georgias, the Carolinas, and so on, in the penal colonies that they created down here. Well, then the Revolutionary War happens, and they're just picking up guns to fight back. So the British can't send any more prisoners to the Americas because it's not working out. But Cook goes, hey, look what I found. So they said, okay, great. So in 1788, they shipped them all down for the first fleet to Australia, where it was 80% convicts, and that became a penal colony, and that's how Australia began its colonization, was because of the American Revolutionary War.
I did not know that part.
And that was the catalyst to why we started out in Botany Bay, and it evolved. Well, the problem in Australia, you may get a 5-year sentence and get shipped to Australia. Well, there was no government, there was no money, there was no nothing. They built little encampments. Think back to the early pilgrims of the Americas. And it was just their community to their community. They were supporting each other. Okay, so your time's up. You're not a convict anymore. Now you become a quote-unquote free settler. Well, you can't go anywhere. You can't earn money to go back. Not that most people want to go back, but it still was terrible times back there. One of my ancestors, Savannah Tress, was on that first fleet. They called it transportation, and she was transported to Australia for stealing bread. She did her time, became a free settler, ended up marrying one of the British soldiers, and that's one line of my lineage. So I'm 7th generation Australian, which is quite amazing.
Yes.
Well, then, what happened in Australia at the time was the soldiers, the military, were running the penal colony. Well, these aren't good times. These aren't great people, really, because they didn't ship their best soldiers down to Australia. So it turned in that they became what was called the Rum Corps. They would use a dram of rum as their currency. Well, the soldiers had the rum, and so they would divvy it out, and they would demand and do trading. So some people would grow goods, and they'd get rum in return, which they ended up drinking it. So that's where Australia's drinking heritage certainly came from. Yeah. But our first governor was Governor Phillip, and he put the early stages of government into place. But by the time Phillip retired, the second one retired, the third governor was a gentleman called Bligh. You might remember Captain Bligh from Mutiny on the Bounty.
Okay.
Well, Christian Fletcher, they rebelled. They put the Captain Bligh and 13 of his officers into an open boat, a rowboat, around the Tahiti area. They navigated, Captain Bligh navigated that open boat all the way to Indonesia, 1,300 miles. It's still the most incredible feat of navigation and seamanship for an open rowboat to navigate through the Pacific, in knowing where he was going. He was aiming for the Dutch East Indies. He was aiming for that play, and he got there. Long story short, they rewarded him with the governorship of Australia. And he came in, he crushed the Rum Corps, put in what is today's government, and he created the real first society that has grown now as the country of Australia.
Wow. So
the story of Captain Bligh turning into Governor Bligh, that part is typically unknown because it's not as dramatic as the other. So each country is always reliant, and its history is tied to other countries. Countries don't just create themselves. Right. They interact with the rest of the world. So that's Australia's story tied to the Americas. And as America goes, so does Australia. In fact, Australia only became a country in 1901. As a country, has fought alongside America in every war that America has fought in. And we're the only country to have done that. Wow. So the tie is incredibly strong. And I'm very proud then to be a dual citizen, Australian and American.
Very cool.
So there you go. It makes it personal for me too.
I love history stories like this.
So do I. And of course I'm abbreviating, and I've probably got a few facts wrong in there, but that's as I understand it. But I love history too.
Have you been to the Titanic exhibit?
No, I have not. I hear it's amazing.
Do you like the Titanic story?
Yes, yeah. It's amazing.
You need to go, and then once you go, let's talk, because there's a lot of other interesting pieces. It was on, I don't know if it made it on our show or not, but we had John, the curator of that.
Ah.
And next year is the 40th anniversary of the finding of the Titanic.
Wow. Has it really been that long?
Am I correct with that? Next year is 40?
Yeah. Wow.
Well, what's interesting, I guess we could talk about, is the person who found the Titanic was actually, he got the Navy's help.
Ah.
But they said he was looking for the Titanic, but he was really looking for two lost submarines.
Ah.
So he found the two submarines with about 7 or 10 days left to continue looking for the Titanic, and he actually found the Titanic right at the last minute.
Isn't that amazing?
So like next year is actually the anniversary of the two submarines and the Titanic, but there's not hardly anything out there about these two subs. That, of course, back then they wanted to keep it secret.
Yeah, right.
But I thought that's an interesting history that has not come out yet, and maybe we can present that at the 40th next year.
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting?
A
little more homework in the stories about it, and who was on the subs, and because who was on the Titanic is full of stories. I mean, in fact, movies, right? And
right.
Documentaries all over the place, and now the latest tragedy, obviously, for the submersible that imploded. Yeah. So the story continues of the Titanic.
Yeah,
it's not just a wreck. It's part of our real world daily life now. It's amazing.
Well, go to the exhibit. The exhibit is unbelievable. I've been to the ship one, the actual ship museum in Pigeon Forge or Sevierville, wherever it is, and that's amazing too. But this one with the end when you put the goggles on, and
you get the immersive experience.
Yeah, it is just unbelievable.
And it's amazing what technology does to bring things to life and get you that fuller, richer experience.
Very much so.
So we were talking about history a little bit, and recently I found out, because when I took the job, I figured, what's the origin of the word bus, and why do we use bus sometimes and motor coach sometimes? And so I did a little bit of Googling, and it's right there. Well, come to find out, in 1826 in France, again, more French innovation, Monsieur Omnes, Omnes, and he had a out-of-the-way, like a general store, I guess would be, and it wasn't on a popular route, and so he wanted to bring people from where the people were out to his place. So he started, basically it's a carriage run, I guess. Is, you know, I haven't seen any pictures, but in my mind's eye, it's in that time of year, I mean, there wasn't any engines yet. And so as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, he called it Omnes Omnibus. Now, the word omnibus means to the general. It's meaning to the public, to the open. It means everybody. It's a general collective. So he was doing this kind of shuttle run, and he, tongue-in-cheek, he called it Omnes Omnibus. Well, that put it in the public's eye, and it was a free shuttle, and it was something that to bring him out to his place so that they would spend money.
And it was not a stagecoach, but it was a horse and buggy.
I guess I would have to imagine, you know, it's just an open horse and buggy, and I don't think it was a long distance, but whatever, it was branded. Well, that had the word, I mean, the word existed, but it now stuck omnibus to a transportation vehicle. Well, okay, great, and obviously got shortened. But then I'm still like, well, what's the distinction with motorcoach? Well, you know, slap my forehead. Well, stagecoaches are something you would actually have to purchase and buy a ticket and schedule, would run on a schedule. And it was horse and stagecoach, just like you see the Wells Fargo
right.
or, you know, the country western times of America. And there were coaches in Europe too, and they were called the stages. So America didn't invent the stagecoach name or the concept. They just roughened them up. I mean, made them more durable for going the cross country. But they were using them in Europe as well. Well, obviously, then along comes the motor, and they replaced the horses with a motor, and they call it a motor coach.
Interesting.
I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. So the distinction today is, and of course, in today's language, we intermingle those terms.
Right.
But the bus is to the public. The first Omnes Omnibus, he didn't charge for it. It was open to everybody because he wanted to bring them out. And others adopted that, and it just got shortened in vernacular to bus. Versus stagecoach evolving to motorcoach. Today, a motorcoach is a distinctive vehicle. It's a 35 or 45-foot bus, if you will.
Luxury.
It tends to be more luxury, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't call it a school motorcoach. You call it a school bus because it's open to all and, you know, or to more of a wider subsection. So it's just interesting the terms of how we get them into everyday working vernacular. And so there you go. Now I know that.
So I think that's very cool because, you know, I have seen a lot of the bus companies still are called stagecoaches.
Yeah.
I believe one of them here in Atlanta.
Yeah, Southeastern Stages. And they still, yeah.
So that's very cool. So I didn't know that history of the bus and motorcoach and stagecoach and.
Well, it's amazing. Our membership are primarily the family-owned companies, and some of them are in their fifth generation.
Right.
You know, and they're running. The kids are in the business, and they're now in the middle management area, and you know continues with the succession planning. And it's amazing the history of some of these companies of how they evolved. They're all generally in the same industry, but each one has its unique story. Depending on where they are, they service a little bit different clientele.
Right.
You know, the California clientele obviously looks different than those out in the Midwest, meaning they have different needs.
Right.
You know, there's more long-haul runs in the Midwest than you would find in the California
So
areas.
what about over here? What is most of your member runs? Are they tour runs or are they transportation?
Well, again, it's a little bit different. Mike Dixon and his company, Southeastern Stages, headquartered downtown Atlanta. Pre-COVID, his company, and again, it's another of those started in the 1920s type of thing, and there's great-grandfather to grandfather and so on and so on. He got involved, or his company got involved in doing what he called schedule runs or line runs. And so he's doing runs from Chattanooga to Atlanta, and it's a scheduled bus run, similar to what you might see a Greyhound do.
Is Megabus still around?
Megabus is still around, but I don't think it's here in Atlanta.
Yeah, because you don't see that. It used to be here.
Yeah.
The double-deckers, but you just don't
and
see
they're hard to do. I mean, there's certain routes you can't take because of the street lights or above you or what have you. Then we have Eagle Christian out of Rome, Georgia. They're relatively new to the scene. It's a dozen years, 15 years. And they take a real hospitality approach, almost like hotels. And so for them, it's about the experience, and it's mainly the group tours. So they do the tours through the Smoky Mountains, or they're running it down to the beach, those types of things. So the business mix is a little different for most of them, but they still have their basic mix. You've got your convention and group business.
Which is great for here.
Which is great for Atlanta. You've got your tours. That's your scheduled tours, but still, they're like you would book a cruise, you're booking a tour. And then you've got your scheduled runs. Those are fixed schedule, point A to point B with stops along the way, similar to what the old stagecoaches used to do.
Yeah.
That is still a business that is highly needed to move people from point A to B. And so it's amazing learning the stories and the history. And every single one of these owners, they are so proud of their family history, as they should be. And that pride is infectious, and the employees who work for them carry that same level of pride. And it's amazing to see how this segment of business that is kind of behind the scenes, you drive past motor coaches all day long, same as you drive past trucks and school buses. Now, school buses, you pay more attention because they make you stop.
Right.
Tour buses don't make you stop. They might get in your way.
You know how often back in the day that I was doing motor coach or group travel, I had to explain, well, what is that?
Right.
It's like, I said, well, yeah, you haven't noticed, especially when you go to a town that doesn't seem to have motor coach business. I'll go, do you even notice all the motor coaches driving around here? Like Colonial Williamsburg in the old days.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's like that now, but it's like buses everywhere.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's interesting how people just don't really associate that.
No,
with
it's
tourism
incredible.
with business.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I appreciate we've had you on a little over an hour. I think you might have the longest show we've done, maybe.
Well, aren't we just taking a quick break and then we'll get another
quick
hour?
break and come back. Yeah. Monica likes to.
I
run
told
the
Monica,
show for
watch
2 or
out
3
when James and
hours.
Phelps get together. We'll be here till closing time. Yeah.
Very much so. Well, unless you have a closing story.
No, not at all, James. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy my time with you, and I'm very impressed with what you're doing here in DeKalb County. It's amazing how you've helped to highlight all of the hidden gems within the county. There's certain things that you know about in DeKalb. Oh, Stone Mountain, of course. I mean, it sells itself. But it's the community-based things that you've really elevated up. And keep up the great work. I'm so pleased that you're here in the Atlanta area. And now we get to work a little bit differently together. And I'm looking forward to that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Phelps, for being on the show. Appreciate everything you've done really to get me in this industry here and acclimated. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.
There you go. Thank you so much.